And welcome to another episode of Hazardous Verbal Waste. I am your host, Shiro Chan. Today is Saturday, November 16th, 2019. Got a lot of really cool stuff to go over this week. So much so that, well, why not? Let's just get right down to it, shall we? In Yu-Gi-Oh! News. Well, actually, there isn't a whole lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! News this week to report on, so I figured I'd give you guys a little bit of an update on what I've been doing with the game. For one, I have pretty much stopped playing Duel Links. It's really not that fun anymore, especially with the way things have been changing recently with the game and where it's going in the future. Duel Links just doesn't seem to be the best for preparing for that. Instead, I've been playing a whole lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Legacy of the Duelist Link Evolution on the Switch. I've been playing a lot of that. I've pretty much beaten the single-player campaign mode, and I've been working my way through the Duelist challenges, some of which are a little bit harder than the initial character in the campaign. Some are ridiculously easy. But it has provided me with an opportunity to test out a few deck ideas, specifically one that I really don't feel comfortable talking about on the air just yet. I want to see how well this deck does before I release it to the world. So I'm going to take it to a couple of regionals, a couple of local tournaments, see how it does, and see if it is as good of a deck as I think it can be, and see how well it does in a more competitive environment. Until then, I will be keeping the deck list and the theme of the deck a secret. I do apologize to you guys. I really want to talk about this deck, but I don't want information about the deck to be released until I've had a chance to test it. Once I've had a chance to test it, then I will release the full deck list. Until then, guys are just going to have to wait and see if it reaches first place or even top 10 in any of the tournaments. Until that time, I can always, if anyone wants me to do a deck profile, why don't you send those to me? I'll let you know how to contact the show at the end of this episode. If there's a particular archetype that you want me to cover or talk about, anything at all, whatever you guys want me to talk about, I will be more than happy to talk about. If any of you think that you are an expert in a particular archetype and you would like to come on the show and talk about it with me and with the audience, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to bring any guests on that you want me to bring on, that I can bring on. Hopefully I can get a hold of maybe some top tier players, but I gotta know those names of who you want to hear about and who you want to hear from. That way any guests are your choice. Until that time, just keep listening. I'll try my best to bring as much Yu-Gi-Oh! News to you as I can in this segment. Unfortunately, that's all I really have for this week. So without further ado, on to the next segment. In Pokemon news, Pokemon Sword and Shield controversy and Dexit explained. As the first mainline Pokemon video game released on a Nintendo home console, Pokemon Sword and Shield marked a new era for the franchise. But as it approached launch, the latest pair of Pokemon games became mired in controversies. For the better part of the year, the Pokemon community has been engaged in a heated debate over the perceived quality of Sword and Shield. Concerns arose initially with an announcement that Sword and Shield's Pokédex would be limited, with no way to transfer many old Pokemon to Sword and Shield. Concerns about character model animations and graphics followed, and the controversy heated up when leaked versions of Sword and Shield were data mined just ahead of launch. The Pokemon Sword and Shield controversy effectively began at E3 2019, though some fans were even skeptical of Sword and Shield when it was first revealed in February, when Pokemon series producer Junichi Masuda confirmed that not every Pokemon across the entire franchise would be available in Sword and Shield. The complete Pokemon collection is known as the National Pokedex, or National Dex. Technically speaking, the National Pokedex is a numbering system which lists every Pokemon that has ever existed. This collection of Pokemon to train, battle, and trade gives dedicated trainers a sense of continuity throughout the Pokemon video game series. Each Pokemon game starts with a regional Pokedex, usually between about 200 and 450 native Pokemon to collect. There are typically requirements that need to be met before you can trade between previous generations of games. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, for example, required players to see the entirety of the new native Pokedex before unlocking the trading feature, and Black and White required players to nearly complete the story before they could transfer Pokemon from previous games. Ruby and Sapphire, meanwhile, didn't have a national dex at all until Fire Red and Leaf Green were released in 2004, but there were still a handful of unobtainable Pokemon that generation. Later, apps like the Pokemon Bank allowed trainers to carry over their previous Pokemon to newer versions. However, bank compatibility was often delayed until months after release, as was the case for both X and Y and Sun and Moon. Now, while transferring Pokemon between generations has never been instant or easy, Pokemon Sword and Shield is the first time that it won't be made available at all. In Pokemon Sword and Shield, the Pokemon Bank will only allow you to transfer Pokemon that exist within its native regional dex. You won't be able to transfer a little over half of the Pokemon from previous generations into Sword and Shield. Masuda confirmed in an interview with Insider Gamer that Game Freak does not plan on adding the missing Pokemon in later updates. According to Game Freak, there simply weren't the resources available to model and create over 1,000 Pokemon for Sword and Shield. One of the oft-quoted reasons for why developer Game Freak pared down the number of available Pokemon comes from a 2019 interview with USG, where Masuda said, quote, "We already have well over 800 Pokemon species, and there's going to be more added in these games. And now that they're on the Nintendo Switch, we're creating it with much higher fidelity, with higher quality animations." In another interview with Japanese game magazine Famitsu, Sword and Shield director Shigeru Omori reportedly told the publication that Game Freak has to redo all the character models for the latest Pokemon title. Now, the Famitsu interview surfaced on the Pokemon subreddit, and some interpreted these quotes to mean that the game would look substantially better than previous Pokemon games. IGN independently translated the interview, which I will read to you now. This time, Masuda and I had a lot of discussions. It had already been very difficult to bring all the Pokemon to Pokemon Sun and Moon, but this time the hardware was Switch, and we had to remake all of the models from scratch, so we had to make some choices. But if you play Pokemon Sword and Shield, I think you'll find that even if there is a restriction to the number of Pokemon we can bring over, things like the wild areas and the story will have a very large volume. Now, Masuda's comments could be interpreted to mean that simply working on higher fidelity machines like the Nintendo Switch is generally more taxing on resources. Regardless, these comments in particular became fuel for critics and opened Game Freak up to further criticism. The National Dex issue and Game Freak's subsequent comments regarding it opened Pokemon Sword and Shield up to wider criticism. The reduced National Pokedex, properly known as Dexit after the British political phenomenon Brexit, connecting to Pokemon Sword and Shield's UK-inspired fictional Galar region setting, is still the primary reason for fan outrage. But attention has since turned to comments made by Masuda during the Dexit aftermath. Masuda's comments about working with higher quality animations served as a launchpad for a broad range of criticisms levied against Sword and Shield. the most prominent center around graphics and animation. Criticism of Sword and Shield's Pokemon animations followed Game Freak's reveal of a new corgi-like Pokemon called Yamper. Yamper's reveal showcased some attacks, including Tail Whip, which critics in the community said was not only lacking in animation quality, but alleged proof that Game Freak's decision to forego a national dex in favor of amplifying the visual quality of the game was a lie. Many fans pointed to an old animation of a Flareon in Pokemon Stadium as evidence that the Yamper animation in Sword and Shield was objectively worse than the Nintendo 64 game. For the record, this is an incongruous comparison. The Nintendo 64 era animation in question was a unique movement made for Flareon's entrance when released from a Pokeball, not an animation for an attack like Yamper's. Now, there have since been exhaustive graphical analysis of the pre-release footage and eventually leaked copies of Sword and Shield that in turn led to calls for boycotts and debates over Dexit, all before Pokemon Sword and Shield was released on November 15th. Now, another prominent critique from the community was around Pokemon Sword and Shield's perceived length and difficulty, with some comments estimating less than 15 hours for expected completion time. 3 staffers at IGN who completed Pokemon Sword and Shield say it's about 39 to 45 hours long, during which they focused on completing the story while doing the usual Pokemon side tasks like catching Pokemon. They also spent time exploring the wild area, cooking curry, or shopping. Some review and guide writers believe it is possible to beat Sword and Shield in less than 20 hours, but at the expense of catching Pokemon, battling trainers, finding hidden items, and talking to NPCs. Now, the discussion about Pokemon Sword and Shield's perceived deficiencies spilled into the wider social media websites thanks to Twitter hashtags like Thank You Game Freak, I Stand with Cerebi, and most recently Game Freak Lied. Now, these hashtags highlighted an active social media campaign where fans either expressed their outrage and unfortunately harassed developers and the prominent Pokemon fan site Cerebi. Not every criticism tweeted under these hashtags was toxic, but the most extreme tweets offered the public its first real look into the raging Sword and Shield debate that grew out of fan communities. Now, the social media conversation took another step before the review embargo for Pokemon Sword and Shield was set to drop with the hashtag GameFreakLied. This latest social media campaign aims to highlight all the corner-cutting Game Freak allegedly took with Pokemon Sword and Shield, citing many of the unverified leaks and pre-release screenshots of the game. The explicit purpose of the Game Freak Lied hashtag was to provide concrete evidence that Game Freak and Masuda lied about why the National Dex was removed. The most popular images shared under this hashtag are of wireframe comparisons that allegedly proved the character models in Sword and Shield were copied from older games. As with the Pokédex leaks and data mines, these wireframe comparisons are unverifiable. Laura Miller, a 3D artist with 7 years of video game development experience, also took to Twitter to show how easy wireframe comparisons are to fake. Quoted, I could fake these screenshots in under an hour by selecting one of 2 identical models in a 3D viewport, which would create white and black outlines, Miller writes. While Miller couldn't confirm whether these specific wireframe models were real, the illustration highlights how unsubstantiated these images that have been used to confirm or deny the Pokemon community's theories regarding the quality or lack thereof of Sword and Shield are. Well, even if the wireframes were reused or not, Miller cautioned that the animation process is far more complex than building wireframe models. Game Freak's decision to iterate on the Pokemon franchise with Sword and Shield rather than introduce a complete overhaul of its visuals and gameplay concept, like Breath of the Wild did for Zelda, seems to have set Sword and Shield up for this massive backlash. Although plenty of the criticism against Pokemon Sword and Shield online covers a broad range of topics, from the animation to the sound design, they all mostly stem from the legitimate concern over the National Dex's exclusion. However, the unverified assumption that Game Freak knowingly lied and took shortcuts to create an unfinished game led to an extended, larger social media driven uproar. This year-long debate threatened to overshadow the launch of the first Pokemon game on home consoles and marks Sword and Shield as one of the most controversial entries into the popular video game franchise. So, how was Pokemon Sword and Shield received in the end? You can check out many of the Pokemon Sword and Shield reviews as a starting point, and of course, share your own views and play experiences in any of the website comments. That's pretty much all we have for Pokemon news this week. On to the next segment. In Magic the Gathering news, Magic the Gathering Arena reveals first historic card set. Magic the Gathering Arena will debut the new historic format as part of its upcoming November game update. Historic is an arena-specific format. The format allows players to use any card in their collection, including those that rotated out of Standard with the release of Throne of Eldraine. In addition to those cards, the Arena team will add batches of cards from past Magic the Gathering sets that aren't available on Arena to the game for use in the new format. These batches of cards will be referred to as historic anthology sets. Wizards of the Coast revealed the 20 cards available in Historic Anthology 1, which will be added to Arena on November 21st. Now, according to the post on the Magic the Gathering website, those responsible for choosing these additions to Historic looked for cards that would help differentiate Historic from the Standard, both before and after the release of Throne of Eldraine. Well, they looked for cards that were staples of past Standard formats and cards that see some play in Modern, but they did not limit their selection to cards that are Modern or Pioneer legal, since they want Historic to be a unique play experience. Now, players can craft these new cards using wild cards, the same as any other card in Arena. Alternatively, they can pay 3,400 gems in the game store to get full playsets of all 20 cards. Now, future historic anthology sets are planned for release on a quarterly basis. Now, players can earn cosmetic styles for 5 of those cards by playing in the historic launch event. The Best of One event runs from November 21st through November 25th. Entry is 1,000 gold or 200 gems, and there's no limit to the number of games players can play. After that, players can take their historic decks into the Best of 3 historic ranked queue that will run until January 15th, the day before the release of Theros Beyond Death. Arena will hold the first major historic tournament around that time. Playing in historic ranked will affect a player's overall constructed deck rank for the season. With the launch of Theros Beyond Death, historic will go into its off-season to put more focus on the new standard. The historic ranked queue will return when the next historic anthology releases in March. That's a lot of information to unpack there, and I can't wait to see what they bring us next. Also in Magic the Gathering news, Magic the Gathering Game Maker exposed 452,000 players' account data. The maker of Magic the Gathering has confirmed that a security lapse exposed the data on hundreds of thousands of game players. The game's developer, the Washington-based Wizards of the Coast, left a database backup file in a public Amazon Web Services storage bucket. The database file contained user account information for the game's online arena, but there was no password on the storage bucket, allowing who with the bucket's name to access the files inside. The bucket is not believed to have been exposed for long, since around early September, but it was long enough for UK cybersecurity firm Fidus Information Security to find the database. A review of the database file showed there were 452,634 players' information, including about 470 email addresses associated with Wizard staff. The database included player names and usernames, email addresses, and the date and time of the account's creation. The database also had user passwords which were hashed and salted, making it difficult but not impossible to unscramble. Now, none of the data was encrypted. The accounts date back to at least 2012 according to reviews of the data. Now, Fidus reached out to Wizards of the Coast, but did not hear back. It was only after TechCrunch reached out that GameMaker pulled the storage bucket offline. Now, Bruce Dugan, a spokesperson for the game developer, told TechCrunch in a statement, quoted, "We learned that a database file from a decommissioned website had inadvertently been made accessible outside the company. We removed the database file from our server and commenced an investigation to determine the scope of the incident," he said. "We believe that this was an isolated incident, and we have no reason to believe that any malicious use has been made of the data." But the spokesperson did not provide any evidence for this claim. Still quoted, "However, in an abundance of caution, we are notifying players whose information was contained in the database and requiring them to reset their passwords on our current system," he said. Harriet Lester, Fidus's director of research and development, said it was surprising in this day and age that misconfigurations and lack of basic security hygiene still exist on this scale, especially when referring to such large companies with a user base of over 450,000 accounts. Quoted, "Our research team worked continuously looking for misconfigurations such as this to alert companies as soon as possible to avoid the data falling into the wrong hands. It's our small way of helping make the internet a safer place," she told TechCrunch. The game maker said it informed the UK data protection authorities about the exposure in line with breach notification rules under Europe's GDPR regulations. The UK's Information Commissioner's Office did not immediately return an email to confirm the disclosure. Companies can be fined up to 4% of their annual turnover for GDPR violations. So, a lot of information there to go over, and hopefully we'll hear more official releases from Wizards of the Coast regarding this data breach in the near future. Well, that's pretty much all I have for Magic the Gathering news this week. On to the next segment. In gaming news, Xbox might not be done with acquisitions. During a recent interview with Eurogamer at XO19 in London, head of Xbox Phil Spencer let everyone know the company still isn't done with their studio spending spree. Despite the event including world premieres of several exclusives from some of the studios they've acquired, such as Ninja Theory and Obsidian Entertainment, Phil Spencer assured gamers that the company isn't done buying studios. There are currently 15 studios under the Xbox Game Studios banner. The titles unveiled at XO19 will be available through Game Pass Ultimate on release. Quoting, "I do think we can sometimes get a little infatuated with putting a bunch of studio logos on a slide, and that becomes the news. They're not trading cards, they're studios, and we want them to build great games," said Phil Spencer. Continuing the quote, "I love the fact that we're here at XO19 announcing 3 new IPs, 2 from our internal studios. As I look forward, there's not a show I can look at where we're not going to be announcing new games, just because of the breadth of studios we have." End quote. Now, it's clear that Xbox is making up for the lack of exclusives earlier in the Xbox One's lifespan towards the ends of it. Quoting, "It's not really some kind of PR battle about how many new acquisitions we can put on stage, because if we're not building great games, the acquisitions don't matter. But are we done? I don't think so." End quote. Now, it's refreshing that Phil Spencer takes the acquisition seriously, evident in having Obsidian continue working on Grounded rather than forcing a new project on them. And we hope that this mature attitude in acquiring new studios, but letting their passion shine through, continues with the other studios Xbox is looking at. Also in gaming news, PS5, specs, price, release date, and how it compares to gaming laptops. Well, the PlayStation 5 is not a laptop, so why are we talking about it? Well, it might just be a cheaper alternative to one of the best gaming laptops you can buy now, even one toting an NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2080 GPU. Rumors suggest that the PS5 might be the most powerful console out there, possibly as strong as a laptop. Here's what we know so far about the PS5 and why you might want to get it over the best laptops. In an interview with Wired, Sony Interactive Entertainment CEO Jim Ryan confirmed that the PS5 is scheduled to launch in holiday 2020, presumably alongside Xbox Project Scarlet. And with that, Sony may also release a PS5 Pro at the same time the PS5 comes out. Considering how much power Sony seems to be bragging about, we're curious to see how much stronger the Pro model actually will be. Now, this comes from Japanese journalist Zenji Nikasawa, as spotted by WCCF Tech, who said on a live stream that both consoles will launch in holiday 2020. Nishikawa has a track record of being right, especially with the Nintendo Switch Lite and PS4 Pro. Now, Sony's Mark Cerny detailed the specs of the PS5 in an interview with Wired, and it seems that the PS5 CPU and GPU will be based on AMD's third generation 8-core Ryzen processor and AMD's Radeon Navi line, respectively. Now, the biggest reveal was that the PS5 will be able to bring ray tracing to consoles, which is the same technology found in NVIDIA's RTX GPUs. Hardware leaker Komachi Ensaka said via a translated tweet that the PS5's GPU will perform close to the RTX 2080 GPU. It's unclear whether this means it'll be closer to the mobile GPU or desktop GPU, but regardless, the machine will be powerful. What I'm most excited about is that the PS5 will finally get an SSD. Now, to show how much faster games will run on an SSD, Cerny played a part of Marvel's Spider-Man that typically takes 15 seconds to load and loaded it in under a second. Sony also said later that the PS5 will deliver dramatically increased graphics rendering speeds, achieved through the employment of further improved computational power and a customized ultra-fast broadband SSD. Additionally, the PS5 CPU will enable 3D audio, which will allow for more immersive experiences. And according to PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan in an interview with CNET, the PS5 will support resolutions of up to 4K at 120 Hz, along with 8K at 60 Hz. Now, if the PS5 is really packing a GPU that's comparable to a RTX 2080, that means it can go toe-to-toe with laptops like the Alienware Area 51M, the Asus ROG Mothership, and the MSI GT76 Titan. For reference, these machines all cost over $4,000 as tested. On the Rise of the Tomb Raider benchmark, very high 1080p, the Area 51M nailed 92 frames per second, the ROG Mothership hit 86 frames per second, and the GT76 Titan scored 68 frames per second. Even if the PS5 is as strong as these machines, it's going to have to dial back the settings to use that 120 Hz refresh rate, and that's just on 1080p. At 4K, the GT76 Titan could reach only 25 frames per second. So I don't see the PS5 pushing 120 frames per second at 4K on the highest settings. And Sony's going to have to dial back those settings hard if it wants to see those high frame rates. To top it off, Rise of the Tomb Raider is a last-gen game. The PS5 might be pushing the same performance, but the graphics in its games will likely be dialed down and still be non-customizable. However, at a fraction of the price, the PS5 is the better deal. If you want ray tracing, smooth graphics, and to not have to worry about optimizing the settings yourself, then the PS5 is probably the way to go. Now, regarding price, Twinfinite reported that Ace Research Institute analyst Hideki Yasuda has predicted that the PS5 will cost $499, which makes it about an eighth of the price of a souped-up gaming laptop. Now, you're not only getting most of the same games you get on PC, but you'll also benefit by getting PlayStation's exclusives, which, in my humble opinion, is much better than the exclusives you would see on PC. Now, although there aren't any confirmed exclusives for PS5 as of yet, think about the sequels we're going to get to really good games like God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Spider-Man. On top of that, with upcoming games like The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghosts of Tsushima, which are more than likely to get PS5 ports, Consider that the former is scheduled to release closer to the PS5's launch, and that the latter still doesn't have a release date. There are a few confirmed games, however, as our friends at Games Radar discovered in a conference call with Ubisoft. The company said that Watch Dogs Legion, Gods and Monsters, and Rainbow Six Quarantine will be optimized for both the PS5 and Xbox Scarlet. In addition, Sony confirmed that the PS5 will play PS4 games and support the current PlayStation VR. Now, even if the PS5 has performance on par with a gaming laptop, a good question would be, how does its VR hardware stack up? According to a patent, the PSVR 2 will have several cameras built into the headset similar to the Oculus Rift S, and it might even be wireless like the Oculus Quest. It's unclear how the specs inside the headset, particularly the lenses, will compare with other headsets like the Oculus Rift S and the Vive Cosmos, which are the leading VR headsets for PC. However, just making the headset wireless would put the PSVR 2 at an incredible advantage. Of course, at the end of the day, how much space is the PS5 going to take up compared to a laptop? Is it going to be as thick as hell, the MSI GT75 Titan, or is it going to be a super slim marvel like the Razer Blade 15? Well, according to a Sony patent, the PS5 might actually be the former. Well, that seems to be all I have for gaming news this week. If there's anything in particular I've missed or that you would like me to elaborate on even further, please make sure to contact the show. I'll give you all the ways that you can do so at the end of the episode. And without further ado, let's move on to the next segment. In entertainment news, Disney Plus has released. What does that mean for everyone else? Well, Disney Plus has arrived, and it has brought with it a huge library of ready-to-stream IPs. Things from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Star Wars movies, the everything Pixar, everything Disney, including every episode of The Simpsons. Huge, huge properties coming to this one streaming service. Whereas when Netflix started or Hulu started, they were reliant on other people's properties to stream on their service. Disney Plus, everything is owned that's streamed on Disney Plus is owned by Disney. I have been watching it for the last couple of days. I watched a couple episodes of The Mandalorian, and my personal opinion, please don't hate me for it, but my personal opinion, Mandalorian, little overrated. However, having access to the entirety of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the entirety of the Star Wars universe, those two items alone are worth way more than what I'm paying for Disney Plus. And also, just to make sure everyone is aware, I did opt for the $12.99 a month Disney Plus, Hulu Plus, and ESPN Plus package, simply because I wasn't willing to give up my Hulu. And combining it with the other two services just was the smart idea. I have to say it's really nice to be able to watch all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies all in one go, all the Star Wars films, and all the other little things. Disney movies previously unavailable to any streaming service, now available on Disney Plus. All the old Disney TV shows, everything is available to stream, and I like it. My wife's really into it too because she loves all those old-fashioned Disney films, all the animated movies. Real nostalgia for her. And so having a streaming service where all of this is available legally, a lot of these films previously, the only way to get them was to either download them illegally or have a copy that was previously purchased either on VHS or DVD and then translated into digital format. Now we have all of these movies ready to go, streamable from, I have the app on my Roku, on my phone, on my iPad, on my computer, and it's just streamable from everywhere. It's streamable from an internet browser, which is huge for me because I do so much of my work, like this podcast, on my computer. So, I mean, that's just my personal opinion on it. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. At the end of this episode, probably in the next segment, I will give you all the information that you would need in order to contact the show. And let me know what your thoughts are on Disney Plus. Well, since that's all I have for entertainment news this week, on to the final thoughts. Before we get to the final thoughts, a quick word from some other shows you might find entertaining.
Hey, I'm Chen.
And I'm James.
We're from A Bloody Mess Podcast, the badly researched true crime podcast.
We straddle the boundaries between documentary and comedy, and our aim is to leave you laughing and thinking, wow, I didn't know that.
So once you're done with this podcast, add us to your download lists and give us a go. Have a nice day.
Bye.
There's been a murder of podcast.
Hello! Do you listen to podcasts? Did you seriously just give me that look? I knew you listened to podcasts, but do you listen to the Bare Naked Ladies? Wait, don't hit fast forward. Yes, there's a band out there called Bare Naked Ladies. They are quirky, fun, comedic, and excellent musicians. If you love alternative 90s music with a little jazz, rap, and country mixed in at different times, then you've got to try this band out. And we will lead you through a journey of getting to love this band. We have 3 or 4 people with different levels of bare naked experience. We have Aaron, who's our music expert that breaks down each song. We will try to be informative, but also, we're all friends, so we like to have as much fun as possible. If you are a moderate fan of BNL, then you'll find new experiences and information. If you're a BNL fanatic like me, then I bet you too will find a song that is a deep dive that you never knew of. We sometimes have guests after the first letter. Oh, did I not mention that? We are Bare Naked ABCs, and the ABCs represents that we discuss the songs alphabetically. So come try us out on all platforms where podcasts are downloaded. Bare Naked ABCs. And no, we are not nude during the recordings.
Bare Naked. Bare Naked. Bare Naked. ABCs.
Hello, future listeners. We are Historical AF. I'm Ashley.
I'm Keena.
And I'm Natalie.
We are 2 librarians and a historian bringing the funny, weird, spooky, and morbid historical nuggets you never knew you needed in your ear holes every Sunday.
And once a month, we bring you extra AF episodes full of your stories and history in the news.
And we do this while hitting the giggle water and gracing the world with our foul mouths and wit.
So if you love to laugh and you like history, true crime, and the paranormal,
then we are the podcast for you, and your girls can't wait for you to join us.
You can find us on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. For a full list of ways to listen, go to historicalafpodcast.wordpress.com. And while you're there, you can check out the photos that accompany each episode.
Yeah, bye. We'll see you soon. I don't know. That'll probably scare them away.
Yeah.
Probably.
Come to us.
Come to the dark side. We have vodka.
And cookies.
Hell yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Well, here we are at the end of yet another episode of Hazardous Verbal Waste. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and found it to be both entertaining and educational. If you would like to get a hold of the show, either with any questions, comments, or suggestions, there are several ways to do so. You can email me at hazardousverbal@gmail.com. You can use the contact form on the Contact Us page of the website, hazardousverbal.com. While there, you can also get a hold of the show through any of the social media networks that we have available. Those links are on the contact page. You can also get a hold of the show via Skype. The Skype ID is Ichimoto1. I check those messages daily, so if you would like to leave a voice message on any questions or comments or concerns you have about this episode or any previous episode, make sure to drop a line, and if you do, I'll make sure to play your message on a future episode. Well, we certainly did cover quite a bit this week. I got to use the Disney Plus platform and got my hands into a little bit. We learned about some interesting news from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Game that I've been playing, and some cool tech news and Magic the Gathering news. Well, that's about all we have for this week. I'm Shiro-chan, signing off. Peace.